If you have CPTSD, you can get stuck in thinking that there is no one in the world you can trust. You can't trust other people. Other people are untrustworthy. Other people are abusive. And that's why you can't create close relationships. That can happen. And you know what? In part, that is very, very true. There are a lot of people that you cannot trust, but there are also a lot of people that you can. And when it comes to the people that you can trust, sometimes we have to start looking at ourselves and the behaviors that we have as a result of the CPTSD that can actually cause us to push away the very people that are good for us, that are healthy, that enjoy reciprocal relationships. We wind up pushing them away with our CPTSD behavior. And this isn't to shame anybody. This isn't to make us hate on ourselves anymore. Definitely not. But what it is about is realizing that when we can start looking at these pieces of us, when we can start understanding them, then we can start changing them so that we can have those healthy relationships. So that being said, let's dive in. For those that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a trauma-informed coach and somatic experiencing practitioner. I specialize in helping people overcome CPTSD and narcissistic abuse. Okay, so let's start with those behaviors that wind up pushing people away. The first behavior is when we are in a trauma response, when we are emotionally triggered. It can also be called an emotional flashback. In other words, what happens when we are in an emotional flashback is that something in the present is reminding our nervous system of something unresolved and unhealed from the past. And so that wakes up unmetabolized energy in the body. And we wind up reacting to our current situation with an intensity that is off the charts. So let's say, for example, let's say we were raised in an environment where whenever we spoke, we were ignored, feeling like you're the living dead, right? And now you're in a relationship, and let's say you say something to your partner and they don't hear you. It wasn't done intentionally, but they didn't hear you. Well, your nervous system, if you have not done the inner work to heal from the past trauma that you underwent, then just because that trauma is in the past doesn't mean that it's out of sight, out of mind, out of body. No, it's in your body. It's in a compartmentalized place in your mind, in the limbic network, and its desire is to keep you safe. But it's always looking for danger because it still has that feeling of danger from the past. Anything that caused you emotional pain is perceived as danger to that limbic network. And so your significant other doesn't hear you. You will feel upset and hurt to a degree that is way beyond what is happening at the moment. And so you will respond depending on your trauma response. If your go-to trauma response is fight, you're going to get pissed and you're going to go off on that person. If your trauma response is flight, then you might just leave. You might even end the relationship. You might completely cut off, burn any bridge that caused you to feel that familiar pain from the past. So depending on your trauma response, you're going to start acting from that trauma response instead of from your personality, from who you really are. And that can be really hard, especially if you have a strong fight response, because basically the person in the present winds up paying for the unresolved pain from the past. And that can be really, really overwhelming. Also, when we have a lot of unhealed triggers, we can wind up changing on a dime. Like 1 minute, you're really happy. The next minute, something happens, you're triggered, and it's like you have a whole different personality because you're not in your personality. You're in your trauma response. And then you come back to your personality and you're okay now, but the other person isn't okay because the swinging back and forth in between those personalities can feel intense. And so the real key when it comes to emotional triggers, a lot of my clients will tell me or ask me things like, Michele, I'm going into this new relationship and these things trigger me. Should I tell my significant other? And obviously, if you're in a healthy relationship and you have that rapport and you've built that trust, you can share your triggers. Absolutely. There's no right or wrong with that. But the real responsibility to not getting triggered or not acting or coming from a triggered state doesn't lie in the other person not triggering you. And this is a hard one. This is when we start realizing that, okay, even if other people trigger me, it is my responsibility to help my nervous system to learn how to work through this trigger from a place where I'm my best self, where I'm not my triggered self. When we are our triggered self, we are never our best self at all. So we have to learn how to work through emotional flashbacks. The second CPTSD behavior that can push people away is when we overshare too fast, too soon. We give too much. And in fact, that's kind of the very definition of how trauma gets stuck in us to begin with, because we go through something that was too fast, too soon, too much, and with no help, right? And so it's almost like we're coming into relationships with that same or from that same place of intensity. And it can be really hard for healthy people to kind of connect with that, because real relationships, healthy relationships, do not usually tend to begin with a bang. There's this automatic connection. It's high, it's over the top, it's so amazing. We met 2 minutes ago, we know each other's life story. That's usually not how a healthy relationship starts. In fact, it's so funny. I was talking to my daughter the other day, and she was telling me about a friend that she has. And we started talking about how that was a friend that she didn't think that they would ever be close. Like the people she thought she'd be close with, she's not close to. And the people that as time went on, that she didn't think that she'd be close to, not for anything bad, but it just didn't seem like that would take place, are the very ones that she values so much as friends. And that's how healthy friendship can usually be. There's not this big, huge spark. Like I said, sometimes it can be, but oftentimes it's a gradual growth. It's a gradual learning to trust each other, sharing back and forth. Healthy people wind up getting deterred by somebody that is oversharing and giving too much, too fast, too soon. It's uncomfortable. There's not enough depth in the relationship for that amount of sharing and trust. Whereas toxic people love people that overshare, because you're sharing and ready to share all of your wounds. They're taking note. They want to know all of that information so that they can use it against you. So remember, the people that wind up liking that are usually toxic. So we have to start learning that relationships are gradual, that we don't have to like pour ourselves out overnight into a relationship. I was talking to a client recently, a young client in their early 20s, and he was saying that in this friend group that he has, there's this one friend that he can't stand because every time everyone asks an opinion, this person is like, oh, whatever you think, and goes along with the crowd and never gives an honest opinion. And he was just talking about how that irritates him. But anyway, that's the reality. When we aren't our true self, people can feel it, and healthy people, they are their true selves. They are authentic, and they want to form relationships with authentic people. Now, in defense of people with CPTSD, I recognize that authenticity is something that we have to learn is safe to engage in. A lot of us have CPTSD because we weren't allowed to be ourselves. There's nothing worse than being born as a human being and feeling like everything that is human about you is a mistake. The way you feel, the way you think, the way you emote, everything is bad. If you had a narcissistic family system, for example, then everything you did was wrong or bad. So there's this intense lack of safety when it comes to you being you. So in order to be able to show up authentic, we have to do our inner work. We have to learn how to have that felt sense of safety from within. That can be challenging to do. We often want to intellectualize it. We want to think our way to safety, but we really have to find ways to feel it from the inside. And this is something that I try to incorporate in Thriver School of Transformation exercises that help you to reestablish that connection to your felt sense of safety. So if you're interested in getting help in Thriver School of Transformation, we have live weekly meetings where we do the inner work together. And the last behavior that I'm going to mention for this video is a discomfort that comes from the lack of safety. So what I mean by that is if you have CPTSD and you were never able to feel safe inside, safe to be you. And again, this can be tricky because a lot of people with CPTSD were never hit. They might have even had parents that never raised their voice. So they're like, do I have CPTSD? Do I not? But they might have had parents that had expectations that made their child feel rejected for being themselves. And that can cause a trauma wound. The trauma wound being, I'm not safe being myself. So if we have this lack of safety inside, And you know if you do, because you'll find yourself in social situations being really hyper vigilant. Like you can't just relax, you can't be in your body. You're like looking all the time for danger. There's a lack of a felt sense of safety. Or you find yourself avoiding social situations just because of how much of a lack of safety it awakens in your body. So when we have this lack of safety inside, people can feel it. It's kind of like you hear people say, oh, this person, I like their vibe. I like being around this person. They have a good vibe. They have a good energy. Well, when you have a lack of safety, what people feel with your vibe is a lack of safety, a discomfort coming from within. The energy that people are feeling is what we are feeling about ourselves. When we're feeling that lack of safety, that's what's coming out of us. People sense that. So again, in order to create those relationships, we have to reteach ourselves that felt sense of safety. The tendency is to try to find people that are safe or circumstances or situations that are safe, but that's always depending on the outside. When you learn it from the inside, that's when you'll be able to feel comfortable around people, and people will then feel comfortable around you. But it is a process. And so if you have any of these behaviors, it's not about beating yourself. It's not about saying, oh my goodness, that's me. I'm this way. This is horrible. No, we don't want to do that. What we want to start doing is realizing that, okay, this is me. This is what's going on as a result of what I lived. Something that I read recently that really touched my heart, because when I was in the thick of CPTSD and I saw the things that I was doing that was making other people uncomfortable, I wasn't like, oh, yay, I can fix it. No, it did create shame. Until I really learned that trauma is not who you are, it's what your body is doing. Okay, so it's not you. And a traumatized body is not a broken one, it is an overworked one. If you have CPTSD, it's because you went through too much, too fast, too soon. It's about helping your body to release a lot of that unmetabolized stuck energy, relearn safety from within, and upgrade the beliefs that were formed as a result of what you went through. And by the way, that is my goal with Thriver School of Transformation, is to provide live weekly assistance to help people to work through the side effects of trauma so that they can finally become who they really are instead of who the trauma turned them into. So if you're looking for support, make sure you check out the links above.